What's up, everybody? It's me, R3D2, and we're back for my first update video on the Switching to Linux challenge. I know it's been a while since I posted my original video on the subject, and I planned to make more follow-ups to it, but I just did not have the time. But we're actually going to be starting, and we're talking about Linux today. My experience so far has been absolutely painful. It's what I would say if it was true. But I have to say, I have to preface this by saying that I genuinely thought there would be a much bigger learning curve with Linux than there actually was, specifically Mint, the distro I'm using. If you guys missed my first video, be sure to go check it out. I'll have it linked in the description. But I cannot express to you how easy Mint was to migrate as someone who's used Windows literally their entire life. Like, my first computer was Windows XP. Then I got a Windows 7 that I had for years. And then I had Windows 10 that I had for years. It's actually two different laptops that were Windows 10. But I have never used Linux in my life before this. And then I tried it, and it was just as easy to understand as Windows. That might just be because Mint was specifically designed to be Windows-like, but that doesn't change the fact that it's extremely easy to use. And I'm actually going to show you around my desktop a little bit, but before I do that, I'm going to take a look at some of the comments that were on my original video and respond to some of these, because some of them were pretty helpful. So I'm going to go here, and then as you can see here, we have my comments for the original video. Be sure to go watch. What a wonderful frame to freeze on there. But, I don't know why it tied this video to Tactical Ops Assault on Terror, but whatever. Anyway, so, most of these comments were kind of like, you know, good luck, that sort of thing. I very much appreciate Daniel Muggas 3009. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Low Spec Linux Laptop. Thank you very much. But, this is what I want to talk about. Humble Tyler 9699. So I really hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. I'm sorry if I'm not. But the reason that Linux has so many different operating systems is not mainly because it's open source, although it is a factor, but because technically Linux is just a kernel by itself. The operating systems we call Linux is the Linux kernel with a bunch of other software like core utilities and desktop environment with a whole bunch of other stuff. People have different opinions on and different needs of what software should go with the Linux, kernel Linux, which is the real reason why the Linux kernel has so many distributions. Okay, first off, now since I understand what this means, I really appreciate this. Like, this is a very helpful comment. If you don't understand what it means, what he's saying is that Linux itself is not a template of an operating system or like an operating system in and of itself. It's the kernel, which is the innermost part of the operating system that is basically what ties software to hardware, if I understand correctly. It's the lowest level that an operating system can be sort of whittled down to and still be somewhat functional. So yes, this is very helpful. Thank you very much. I did not understand this. I mean, I understood the concept basically, but I thought that Linux was an operating system in and of itself, which is kind of what I've said in the video. But I greatly appreciate that. I don't know why I didn't give it a heart at first. So this is actually a friend of mine. He basically asked me how to change to it. I might do a video on that eventually, but it's kind of difficult to explain in a YouTube comment. But, okay. Netwalker-1 says, when Linux touches your heart, it stays there forever. Experiment, take notes, adapt, and learn. It takes a while to assimilate that Linux is actually simpler than Windows, and I actually have to say that from what I can tell, it actually is simpler than Windows once you, depending on your distro. So if you get like a super complicated distro, then no. But something like Mint, yeah, it's definitely simpler than Windows. Alright. Dreeper5813. Some advice. If you want a better out-of-the-box experience, use AMD hardware. Intel is another option, but avoid NVIDIA GPUs. Also, if you want a better performance for gaming, you'll want to run the Wayland display server over Zorg. With Wayland, using AMD or Intel graphics is important as the drivers are open source and support Wayland way better than that of NVIDIA's proprietary drivers. What's even more amusing is that AMD hardware works better on Linux than on Windows these days. Just plug it in and forget about it for the most part, just like with Intel hardware. One other thing, Mint Cinnamon Desktop only supports Zorg, so if you want to use Wayland, you have to have an even smoother gaming experience. you will have to use a distro with a desktop environment that supports Wayland, like GNOME or KDE Plasma. Finally, for laptops, avoid cheap Realtek Wi-Fi cards. You're best off sticking to Intel network adapters, although Realtek LAN adapters are passable, but in general, Realtek isn't great, including audio, even on Windows, so keep this in mind. Okay, that was a very big comment, and it was actually very helpful. I actually knew or had discovered about half of this on my own. First off, a better experience out of the box with AMD hardware. Two things. One, I did know this going in. I knew that NVIDIA was kind of finicky on Linux, which is part of the reason I like it, because screw NVIDIA because of their crazy pricing. Like, have you seen the 4090? I'm not saying that AMD is so much better. I'm just saying that they seem to have their heads screwed on a little better right now in terms of pricing. Anyway, yeah. So I did get this. And so, funny enough, I actually am using AMD hardware. I don't remember exactly what CPU I have. I think I can actually look it up in system properties. Something else I like about Linux. System info. Yep. Okay, let's see. Processor. AMD Ryzen 7 5700G with Radeon graphics. Yeah. So, yeah, that's my CPU, and that's an AMD CPU, and I have an RX 6600 XT. It's not the 60. I don't know why the 6600 is here, but I have the 6600 XT. So yeah, I am using fully AMD hardware so far. So I've had a pretty good experience with Linux, but yeah, I'm pretty much going to avoid NVIDIA anyway. This is something else I said, that NVIDIA's proprietary drivers, basically NVIDIA's drivers, unlike AMD or Intel's, are not open source, so it's harder to adapt. From what I can understand, harder to adapt into Linux. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to pretend like I know how adapting between different drivers and operating system works, because I don't. So I'm just going to say that I vaguely understand this. Mint Cinnamon Desktop only supports Zorg. So I actually don't know what Zorg or Wayland are. I definitely need to look into those. Thank you very much for pointing that out. But if I can't use it with Mint Cinnamon, then I'm not sure if I will change, because I really like Mint Cinnamon. I might eventually try another distro, but so far I like Cinnamon Mint. So basically what this means is that Mint is the main operating system that I'm using, is the distro I'm using, but Mint has like 3 different versions called flavors. That Cinnamon is the most demanding of them, typically for like Windows 7 level hardware, but there's versions with lower system requirements if you have an older system. For laptops, avoid cheap Realtek Wi-Fi cards. Okay, so this is basically Wi-Fi is kind of finicky on Linux for some reason, and like Realtek Wi-Fi cards don't really seem to work. I unfortunately found this out for myself, because I have like a USB dongle that plugs into my desktop PC where I have Linux installed, and I could not connect to the internet, and that baffled me for like a whole day. Basically, I did not know specifically it was Realtek, but basically what I have done now is I take my laptop, which is still Windows 10, sorry, but basically I plugged it into used an Ethernet cable to plug my laptop into my desktop and then enable network sharing. So I'm using my laptop as a Wi-Fi server. So like I said, 100% Linux is not really possible for me for a number of reasons, but using it as a Wi-Fi server doesn't really count, I don't think, in my opinion. But yeah, so that's the last of the comments. Thank all of you for your comments. I really do appreciate it. So we are going to get into things that I like about Linux. I just realized my hair is crazy. My headphones are like sticking my hair up. Sorry about that. So we're gonna look at my desktop real quick. So as you can see, I got lots of games and stuff, but Linux is one of the main selling features of Linux that I was at first like really sold on was the customization, and I can definitely see why. Because you may have noticed a second ago, I have a sidebar here where I have like all my overflow icons. So basically, on Windows, these would be on this side of the taskbar down here. But in Linux, you can actually create multiple taskbars, or panels as they're called in Mint, and basically make it to where they will hide unless you mouse over them. So basically, like my overflow icons that would normally be over here, they're only there when I need them to be. And I also have like my CPU temperature here, printers, volume, network, mouse, OBS Studio, all that is just right here. just put it over here, and I have all my startup. On start, the start menu, this is one of the biggest improvements over Windows 10 that I enjoy. This search bar here is local only. Let that sink in for a second. Local only. So, in Windows 10 and 11, they have this search bar, you know what I'm talking about, where you can look up apps and programs and web results. The problem is that for some reason it seems to favor web results over actual files locally on your computer. This is local only, so you won't get random like web stuff popping up. So basically if I was going to look for a program, say Team Fortress 2, it's right there. There's no web results on here. It's just... If you can't tell, I'm a big Sonic fan. But there's no, let's say, random file.xml, say, game constant. Okay, yeah, so it won't go quite that far. But the point is that this is very useful because it's for finding apps and files locally on your computer without web cluttering it up. And it also functions really well. Like, you don't have to, like, scroll constantly. There's, like, a actual, like, you can just hold your mouse and it'll scroll up. I don't really know how to describe that. The package manager, or software manager as it's called in Mint, allows you to just download programs and have them installed. I have run into a couple of issues with this. Like, for some reason, some of the apps just don't download for some reason. They just don't function properly. I had this problem with Wine, but I finally got Wine fixed. But most of the time, it seems like it works perfectly fine. It's got some fun little games in here. I actually have not looked at any of these so far. But big apps like Visual Studio Code, Discord, all that, Steam, Skype, it's all here in this. You just click here, and then you click install. I thought I had Discord installed. Whatever. I think I installed it from the web version anyway. But... oh, something else. The clock and like the time can show you the date, time, down to the second, instead of just being, you know, the hour on Windows. Like the Windows, you have to click on the menu. Like, I mean, I like this calendar a lot more too. You have to like click on it to show everything, but here I can show you everything you'd need to know at a glance instead of like going into a menu on Windows. Another big thing for me is game compatibility, which is, you know, always the problem on Linux, or has always been the problem on Linux. But thankfully, with Valve's Proton compatibility layer, we now have the ability to basically force games to run on Linux. So, for example, Choo Choo Charles, great game, by the way. If you go to Properties, Manage, and then go to Compatibility, you can force the use of Proton, which will basically allow the game to run on Linux. And you can actually do this to programs Windows programs that are not strictly games. Like if you have a program that only runs on Windows, you can bring it over here and force it to run through, like add game, add a non-Steam game, and then just add it that way and force it to run through Proton. Now, this does not work for everything, like this Empire at War mod launcher thing that I use sometimes. For some reason, it does not run on Proton, so it's not like not everything runs. Some things do, some things don't. It's like a app-to-app basis, I guess. But it runs all the games that I want to play. The only game that I play that has some issues, apparently, is Halo Infinite, where they talked about like some might just randomly crash, but I've not encountered that. To be fair, I've not played Halo Infinite on here yet. I plan to eventually. But, so game compatibility has not been a problem for me. So far, anyway. But aside from that, that's pretty much all I have to say. There's a few, of course, there are other things that I could say, but it's been said by any number of people on the internet already, and I'm just going to say that I'm having a very positive experience with Linux. I expected this to genuinely be a challenge, but it has not been at all. If you guys have been skeptical about trying Linux and you don't want to try Windows 11, Windows Mint is Did I just say Windows Mint? Linux Mint is a fantastic operating system alternative. It has lower system requirements than Windows 10, and it can run, basically will have support, at least like, I guess support for the foreseeable future, and is just simpler than Windows in a lot of ways. You should try it out if you like Windows. I'm not going to say you have to try Linux. If you like Windows, you like Windows. I like Windows still, but I just don't want to go on to Windows 11 because of all the issues I've heard about it. And truthfully, I would stay with Windows 10, but since it's losing support in a couple of years, I figured I might as well try Linux. So that's my recommendation. If you're willing to try something new, Mint is a good one. And if you don't want to try Mint, you can try one of the other distros like Pop! OS or Ubuntu, which is the one that they're both based on, or something not based on Ubuntu like Manjaro. So whatever you guys want to try. If you don't want to try it at all, that's fine. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for your comments, and I really appreciate it. And I'll try to get more updates out, but no promises because my schedule is crazy. I'll see you guys in the next video.